You ready?
Yeah.
You ready? All right, hold on. Here we go.
What's going on, everyone? This is the My Aggie Nation podcast. We're back for another week, and it was a big week. It was a big week for college football fans and video game fans around the world. I'm Travis Brown with the Eagle, myaggienation.com. Over there, across town, my co-host, my everything.
Wow.
Zach Taylor.
Wow, you just took it up to a 10, huh? Man.
Yeah, I figured this is the appropriate spot to, just show my appreciation.
Yeah, to let it all out when we're not in the same room together. That's probably smartest. That's probably the best bet.
So anyway, Zach.
Travis.
EA Sports announced that college football is coming back to the video game platforms near you. How excited are you?
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait to be in the game. I'm excited. I'm excited about NCAA. Obviously, that's something that's been missing for the last several years, and everybody loves getting on that bad boy. I remember I actually went out, and I think I had sold my video game console, and I went out and bought like a PS3 just so I could have Madden. Or I could have Madden and I could have NCAA. So, I went out and did that. And I don't know, that was a few years ago, but it was after the last game had already come out, and just being able to get on that and play with your favorite teams. And you could even start your own teams if you wanted and all that good stuff. You could do your dynasty thing. So, no, it was fun, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, in our next segment, we can kind of wax poetic about our NCAA football nostalgia, because I have some thoughts. But this segment, I had the chance to talk to Matt Malliaros, who writes for Cinelinx, which he self-describes is a website devoted to movies, video games, and general nerd life. So he knows a little bit more about the ins and outs of what's going on in the development of this game, and just kind of how these games are developed. Because I noticed when I read the press release, it said we'll keep an eye on these things as we develop the game from the years to come. And you're kind of like, years, but I want it now. So coming up here next is my interview with Matt. He actually lives in South Korea, so we had to do this a little bit earlier than when we were recording the full podcast. But first, before we get that, I want to clarify a little bit of a conversation that we have in there, and that is about name, image, likeness issues, because that was the whole reason why this game went away in 2013, when Ed O'Bannon, a former UCLA basketball player, sued the NCAA and also CLC as well as EA Sports, saying that they weren't going to... His argument was that they couldn't use his name, image, likeness in these games without providing him a royalty. And in the middle of that, the NCAA pulled out of their licensing for those games, and that basically was the death knell for the games at the time. Now, of course, EA Sports is partnered back with CLC, which is a department of Learfield IMG. That's what carries A&M's media rights, so that's why A&M should be in the game, as well as 100 other schools, logos, stadiums, whatnot. Name, image, likeness is the thing that is actually being discussed up on Capitol Hill right now, and it's something that the NCAA is going to have to rule on. That is, can the names, images, likenesses of players be used in video games and other things, and how will they be compensated for those? Florida passed a law for that said college athletes in that state can make money off name, image, and likeness, and that starts in July 2021. So the clock is ticking for there to be a national ruling on if players can make money, make profits off of these kinds of things. Just yesterday, I think, a Democratic congressman from Connecticut filed an act that called for all players to be able to get compensation in the most liberal of terms, that they can collectively bargain with each other, that they would be, I don't know if it actually said that they would have an employee-employer contract with the universities, which is not something that they have now. But basically, by July 2021, there should be some legislation on the books with the NCAA and possibly with some of the help of the Congress and the Supreme Court on what college athletes can pull in and how they can pull in money for their name, image, and likeness. If, like, for instance, the legislation from the congressman from Connecticut passes, then actually they can collectively bargain for themselves on how much money they'll get. There's other legislations and other talks that might not give athletes quite that amount of power, but maybe it'll give the schools the chance to collectively bargain for their athletes, and some of that money will go towards them. So that's kind of what they're following right now. In some of our conversations, talking about when names, stats, actually identifying the players in the game might drop in, that's going to come probably down the line, but I just wanted to clear up some of those issues that are going on right now for name, image, and likeness as it regards to this game. So, without further ado, here's my talk with Matt Malliaros. So I have Matt Malliaros on the line with me here, and coming from me all the way from South Korea, I believe. Is that correct, Matt?
Yeah. I'm in South Korea right now. Thank you for having me.
That's crazy. Yeah, Matt Malliaros is an editor and writer for Cinelinx, which is a movie, gaming, and, as he describes it, geek culture website, which is things that, I like to participate in, but don't necessarily know all of the ins and outs of. And so with the big news, if you're like me, I'm a guy who follows a lot of sports, covers a lot of sports, and all of my life spent day in and day out playing the EA Sports NCAA football franchise. And so when the news came out this week that EA Sports was going to be reviving, to some extent, this franchise, having an NCAA or having a college football game, everyone got excited. And then you kind of read the press release and you go down and you see that it's a press release that this is going to come in the future, and more information will be coming in the ... years ahead. And so if you're like me, who knows really nothing about game development, everything, the ins and outs of how these things work, you're like, wait, years? Why are we talking about this now if there's years in the future? So Matt, tell me, I know that you don't know these things because they're usually part of the discussions and the developments within the company, but generally speaking, why does that press release say years?
Well, it's because typically video games take at least 2 to 3 years to make. Like, you look at very large, upscale games, most recently the game that won Game of the Year, The Last of Us Part 2. That game took probably upwards of 5 years to make. Because you need the artists, you need the gaming mechanics, you need all the code necessary to put it all together. And even before all of that, you need to get through all the planning meetings to decide how you're going to even create this game, what strategies, and then just the overall process and development and execution of the game. So typically whenever these publishers, these developers come out and say, hey, this game is coming, it's mainly just to generate that excitement. But yeah, they're usually pretty spot on in the fact that it's in the coming years. Now, with EA Sports, that one's a bit different, because the way I see and the way I know EA Sports to be is because they have the Madden franchise, and every single year they come out with a brand new Madden, but all they really do is kind of just update things, mechanics here and there, and they add in rookies and maybe new players and then just upgrade stats. They usually have a lot of the builds already put together with all of that. So they're able to generate the games pretty quickly, which means that I could see this NCAA game being more on the sooner rather than the later side of the years to come.
Sure. Now, I know there's a lot of issues and a lot of the whole point of canceling their franchise and now bringing it back was things to deal with name, image, likeness issues that are actually going up before Congress, and there's legislation that might be coming down, and that was part of the press release of why that they were able to bring this back with a partnership with CLC, which is a part of Learfield Sports. They'll have about 100 schools that they can pick and choose logos, stadiums, things for. So with all that being said, we'll kind of put that a pin in that, because we're definitely want to talk about the game creation and whatnot. You mentioned the Madden franchise. I know that there is a lot of mixed reviews and people have their takes on Madden. Do you feel like, because it's EA Sports, and again, I know we're just speculating here, it would feel and look a lot like Madden, or do you feel like that this would, because maybe they are saying years, they might develop this out as a completely different game with a different engine, with different physics and whatnot? What would you think would be the case on that?
That's the concern, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
As any Madden fan, not necessarily fan, but any Madden player would say, like, the last couple of Madden games definitely weren't the best foot forward. So that is a bit of a concern for any sort of NCAA game. And then also, I mean, especially the fact that they're not going to use any actual player likenesses or any actual players. I mean, that's kind of half the fun of even playing games like this. It's tough. It's really tough to say, because I feel like, you have all this time to maybe build a game from the ground up, and I think EA Sports should definitely take advantage of that and try to make a game that is overall what the players and that fan base wants to experience. And I think if they go back to what they did back in 2014 and the years prior, then they'll find great success in that, just update what they did there. But I think a lot of the issues and what makes players scared is if EA uses their Frostbite engine, which is something that they use a lot, because that Frostbite engine has reportedly been very hard to use with a lot of these studios. So I think they found better success with games like Apex Legends, where they didn't use that Frostbite engine and instead they used Unreal Engine. But then you have games like Anthem where they just crashed and burned because that Frostbite engine just wasn't up to par. And then even with this Madden, and even the Madden before, they used that Frostbite engine, and it hasn't felt the same as it did before they started using it.
Sure. So, I know Katie Barber, who used to work here at the Eagle, who has her own, also writes for the same website and has her own podcast and stuff, kind of connected us. She said that you were a sports video game guy. Did you play much of the college football series from 2014 before? Do you have many memories with that, or what's kind of the extent of your sports gaming as well?
Yeah, I absolutely did. I loved it. It was just a blast, and I mainly play those games to be able to play with my friends. So we would get into conferences together, and we would, we would build up 5-star players. We would just try to have honestly, just the best school, each of us. And I'm a huge Aggie fan, so I would always take the Aggies. So yeah. Yeah.
What do you think would be the best parts of that series to bring over to the new series that are musts in making it a successful franchise and giving it that feel of what everyone loved and yearned for, but also keeping true or bringing something new, spicing it up a little bit?
Well, I think the customizability that you had with the NCAA games was a lot better than what you've dealt with Madden, in that you had more unique uniforms. You could just change up helmets, change up everything else that you wanted. But more than that, I think having just better playbooks, better schemes that only college can really offer is something that's just, I think, been severely lacking for a lot of sports gamers. I think if they bring back a lot of that, and they just make sure that all of the features as far as catching and running routes and all of that feel natural and normal and updated to what today's college players are doing, I think then you would have something really cool.
Well, and as you mentioned, you're an A&M fan, every Aggie fan would want, you got to have an updated Kyle Field too.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. Yeah, that would be incredible for sure.
For sure. So, I mean, define a little bit too, because I know I'm kind of throwing out words that I vaguely know, and there's probably people who know even less on here who literally just bought the system to play the NCAA game and don't know. We talk about engines. We talk about that's one of the biggest drawbacks, and one of the things that people who haven't liked the last couple of Maddens, like, kind of define what an engine is and what that does in a video game to make it playable, make it not playable, make people enjoy it, and what people can look forward to or not look forward to maybe to this upcoming NCAA franchise.
So the game engine is essentially what is like kind of like the base of the game. It's what really powers that game and gets all the code and distributes the code where it needs to go, sort of thing. That Frostbite engine that they have was originally designed by one of their studios called DICE, and it was made for the Battlefield franchise. Well, the Battlefield franchise did so well with the Frostbite engine, and everybody loved it. Everybody thought it was amazing. But unfortunately, it just they loved it. They thought it was amazing. But then the EA thought that every game should use that. And then that's kind of been the issue since then.
Gotcha. And so, I mean, in video game years, if this will take, like, let's say a couple of years to really fully develop and get on the market, what does that relate to in what you say, like, video game years? Where can maybe we be as far as engines go, as far as graphics goes, as far as the next generations of what video games have to offer when this actually hits the shelves?
Well, I think it's going to hit the shelves in... honestly, if I was to speculate when it would hit the shelves, I would say probably 2022. Just because I think EA Sports is able to make those games and churn out sports games pretty quickly, especially since they already have a lot of like the overall base models that they need from the Madden franchise, and I think they'll just maybe go to different college campuses and maybe, try to get some college athletes to mocap for them for other things. But as far as the technology and the update with next-gen consoles, I don't expect there to be a whole lot of difference with the engine itself, but I think they'll add things that maybe weren't capable of being added with the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. And that's kind of, and I say that because I know that recently they did that with Madden for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, where they added like pro football stats to those. So I think they'll probably add something like that to make the routes a bit cleaner, more natural, and create an overall realistic football experience.
Yeah, and something that I don't know, you might know a little bit about or not, but I think everyone marvels a little bit when you open up a game like we mentioned earlier and you see like, hey, this is a full digital representation of Kyle Field, or if you talk about Madden, let's say like AT&T Stadium or NRG Stadium, or I'm a big FIFA guy, so I'm a Leeds United fan, so they just scanned in, and Ellen Road is just now playable in FIFA. What kind of goes into that, and to be able to make such a robust and accurate depiction of real life venues like that?
It takes a lot of work. They typically, when these guys, when they get this project in their hands, part of the planning process is going to those fields or to those stadiums and just pretty much spending so much time there taking pictures, taking in the atmosphere, and just, trying to figure out the tiny little details of those stadiums. And then what they'll typically do is they'll hand in to the artist, they'll hand in all of these pictures, they'll and then those artists will just try to recreate it from there. And it's a bit of a process. But I think like you're talking like with games with AT&T Stadium, specifically with NCAA football, I think all they'll probably do with that is just take in all the models that they had with the Madden franchise, just because, AT&T Stadium hasn't really changed much since then, and then they'll probably just use that. But I think with all the other fields, because I think they said it was over like 100 fields that they were probably, or 100 stadiums they were going to put into the game, or at least 100 colleges, I think it's going to be a pretty arduous process to go from each one, take pictures, look over, walk around the whole thing, and then give it to the artist, and then the artist recreates it from the ground up. But I think some of them too, and this is kind of where you kind of cut corners a bit, is that some of these fields, some of these stadiums, they kind of look the same. So they'll probably use the same models, but maybe just update the shaders and the colors and logos, and then just go that way.
Sure, and then we'll close it out with this. I know I've wanted this game to be back. This was one of the main games that I went and purchased and went at midnight to get when I was through my college years, and a little bit after that to go play, as did a lot of people. You know that you heard rumblings, and you saw the excitement when new conversations with name, image, and likeness came along, that hey, maybe they could bring the game back. But as far as someone who kind of analyzes and studies the video game aspect, how much of an outcry, how much of a yearning was there from what you were seeing for this game to come back, and how much of a kind of seemingly of a home run has it been since the announcement that they were able to produce this game again?
It's been huge, I think the fan outcry has been there since, at least 2014, 2015 when everything went down. Usually what would happen is that there would be every year or so, there would be some sort of fake rumor going around that NCAA was coming back. And everybody would get so excited. Everybody would get thrilled. I'd get people messaging me saying hey, have you heard anything? Oh my gosh, NCAA's back. And I was like, yeah, but the lawsuit's still going on. So, it was always just something that everybody wanted. It was something that was in the back of everybody's mind. So for them to officially announce that it was back, oh man, it was just absolute pandemonium and excitement, because I think this is just something that, and it goes back to what you were saying, it's just something that everybody has loved. Everybody loved playing it. Everybody enjoyed playing it. And it's a much more unique sports game experience than what you experienced with Madden and really any other game. So I think having it back is just really excitement. I think there is that hesitation because since it went, or it got, I guess, canceled, EA, their reputation has not really been as stellar as it was before then. So I think there's a lot of hesitation about whether or not this game is going to be as good as it was in the past. And honestly, I can't say it's going to be the same game. But I think the excitement is there, the hype is real, and it is just really cool to have NCAA football back in whatever form it's going to come in.
Yeah, well, how much of this, kind of reading between the lines of what you're saying there, is making this announcement, especially this far in advance, as much as a kind of a PR thing to kind of get EA back in the good graces of people who might have thought that their product might have slipped a little bit in the last handful of years or so.
For sure, absolutely. I would 100% agree with that. I think any good PR for EA is great for them, because they've had a lot of issues in the past few years. I mentioned it with Anthem. The Star Wars franchises have had a rough go until Jedi Fallen Order recently. It hasn't been a great, I guess, half decade or even more than that for EA.
For sure. And the only thing that, this is a personal question just for me, because I'm older and have only been able to invest in a Switch. There's probably really no chance that I'm going to be able to get college football on a Switch either, with no Madden already existing, right?
Well, Madden's not even on Switch.
Right,
so
right.
I don't think it's gonna happen anytime soon. I'm sorry. Yeah,
Dang.
I'm waiting for it too. If I could play on the subway, my Madden games, man, my life would be so much easier.
I know, right? I know. Well, hey, Matt, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for filling us in who like to play the games but don't know as much about the backdrop of the games. Is there anything that I missed in talking with you that people need to know about this college football game and the development and things coming forward that just evaded my perspective as someone who simply just plays the games?
Oh, sure. I think one thing I would add is that with the likenesses, it would not surprise me if they were to add the likenesses of players later on with DLC, where they include, you buy the base game that doesn't have any of the likenesses, and then later on they'll include the DLC that includes all the likenesses after the NCAA has started paying the players. I think that might be a realistic thing that could happen because EA loves to add players and mechanics and other features after the fact. After the game.
Sure. And that actually raises a good point of something that really wasn't in existence in 2013, I guess, when the last game was developed, and that is the idea of in-app purchases per se. When you look at things like the emergence, and I'm kind of talking out of my range here, but and you can correct me, but things like Fortnite now, where actually you have games that are free, but you pump all of this money into games, buying skins, buying weapons, and I'm again talking out of my range here. Do you see that? You've seen that in other sports games when you have like the Ultimate Team offerings where you could buy packs of cards to help bolster your ultimate team, and you can buy other in-app type things. Do you see that might be a huge part of this game moving forward as it's been in other games, and it's a part of the game that really wasn't there for the true diehard fans of the NCAA franchise?
Oh yeah, 100%. I could totally see that. Now, will EA be able to get away with that? I don't know about that. Because Electronic Arts, I mean, back when they did Star Wars Battlefront 2, they had all these microtransactions that would allow you to get like Darth Vader and all this other stuff, and it created it was a big issue with players, and they rioted, they boycotted until like they ended up taking the vast amount of microtransactions down. So I think if it's in EA's best interest, they would make it free, like a free DLC, if they are going that route. But honestly, I could 100% see them adding like a pack for like maybe, I don't know, let's say $5 to include all the likenesses, and say that that $5 will go into paying the players. I think if you said that, I think a lot more NCAA football fans would be maybe more inclined to purchase a DLC.
Sure. Well, Matt, I know as we went on, I told you this was going to be a pretty short interview, and it's just been so fascinating that I've kept going, but I won't take up too much more of your time. Before we go, why don't you, if you can let the listeners know where to find your work, and reach out to you if they have any other questions, comments, or want to talk about video games and as you said, the geek culture.
Absolutely, yeah. You can find me on Cinelinx.com. I'm also on Twitter at MoveTheJoystick. And you can feel free to email me too at matt@cinelinx.com.
Great. Well, Matt, thank you so much. Appreciate the time. And when maybe this gets a little bit closer, we get some more information about this, we'll reach out to you again here on the My Aggie Nation podcast.
Sounds great. Anytime.
Big thanks for Matt Malliaros for coming on and having a chat with Travis. And we're all pretty excited, pretty stoked about the EA Sports NCAA football. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, well, we'll pick it up where we left off. Again, you're listening to the My Aggie Nation podcast.
Welcome back to the My Aggie Nation podcast. We are celebrating the return of the NCAA football franchise. It's actually going to be called EA Sports College Football this go around, not NCAA football, but hopefully having some of the same ideas, concepts, some of the same types of gameplay and whatnot that everyone will recognize that game they know and love. Zach, I know you mentioned a little bit before buying a PS3 so you could go back and play that and Madden. I know in 2013 was the last year that the NCAA football franchise put up a game. It was actually NCAA 2014, came out in 2013. How much of that game was a part of your college career and the years after that? I know for me, that was like at least once a week, all the dudes were in the dorm room or at the place during college playing some kind of little mini tournament or something like that.
I mean, the game itself, like in college, I'll be honest with you, I'm not a huge gamer. I mean, I would play NCAA from time to time. I would play Madden from time to time. I had roommates that were obsessed with FIFA, so they played that all the time and Call of Duty, but I played it a little bit throughout college. It was actually after college whenever I went and got that PS3 because for some reason I just had a hankering. I was like, you know what? I want to play that game. I want to sit down and I want to enjoy it. And so I went out and got it. But all that being said, I wasn't a guy that, religiously played it like all the time. But I do remember the final game that they did come out with, because they were having a contest for who would be on the cover. And I remember Ryan Swope, Texas A&M wide receiver, was in a battle with, oh my gosh, his name is leaving my brain for right now. Robinson. I remember
Denard Robinson.
Right, yeah, Denard Robinson the third, right? Yeah, from Michigan.
He was the one who didn't have the shoelaces on his cleats, right?
Is that how he got his nickname? I knew his nickname was Shoelace. I didn't remember if it was that or not. Okay, I just remember him getting trucked by Jadeveon Clowney in that bowl game. But I remember it was those two guys head to head, and they were doing a Twitter vote for it, basically. And so you had everybody, all the Texas A&M fans that were voting for Ryan Swope, and I think he nearly won. Like, it was super duper close, but in the end, Denard Robinson got the cover. So I do remember that part of it.
Wasn't Chris Ash or one of the Texas quarterbacks, what's his name, Chris, also in the running for that too?
Maybe. I just remember it came down to Ryan Swope and Denard Robinson. I just remember that was the final one, and then of course Swope had his injury things after he got drafted and never played in an NFL game, and then Denard Robinson got converted to running back, and I don't know, he spent a couple of years in the league, right?
I think so, but he kind of fizzled out.
Yeah, played for Jacksonville.
Same manner.
Yeah.
No, it was a huge part of my college experience. Like I said, there was plenty of times where guys would gather up and back then it wasn't the 14 edition, because I'm older than that, but I remember the team that everyone was frustrated. You couldn't beat Texas Tech, because I think that was the year that Michael Crabtree was on the cover in the game, or it might have been the year before that. And if you threw a vertical fade to him pretty much every time, it was going to be a touchdown.
He was coming down with it, yeah.
And it was just ridiculous. I think that same year, or the year that Crabtree was on the cover, they did a midnight release, and they also did, if you came in early before the game, you got to do a tournament before. And so I was working a summer camp in Dallas, like an in-city summer camp. And so me and a couple guys who were working that went at midnight and signed up, and I'm pretty much sure I got waxed by a 10-year-old.
As it goes.
As it happens. So that was always exciting. But yeah, man, for me, the only two games I really played were NCAA and NHL, the EA franchise of that, and I basically had a gaming console just to play those two games. So a little excited. Now, I only have a Switch right now, which is the Nintendo portable gaming system, because it's a really nice way to get through those 10-hour SEC road trip drives that we do at times.
No joke.
To go through. And they don't have Madden on that, which I know we were talking with Matt earlier about how the game could be developed a little bit sooner than a game made from scratch, because they could use some of the Madden engines and motion captures and stuff for the game, so they're not starting from ground zero. That being said, I don't think that my Switch is going to have it, and then I'm going to have to weigh the cost benefit analysis of basically getting a new system for that one game.
How you're going to be able to cover it. Yeah, no, I completely understand. Yeah, I don't know. You wonder how many people are actually going to have to go out and buy new consoles just to be able to play those games.
Yeah, for sure. Well, since you're lacking on, we didn't talk about this before we started the podcast, and I thought you would just be all over NCAA hot takes and have played it into the wee hours of the night many years in college, but I misappropriated your gamerness. Yeah,
I mean, I spent a couple of nights. Not going to say that it never happened, but I was not a religious follower, I guess, of the games or of gaming in particular. So
well, you follow college football. You have played the game. Let's do this before we move on to actual real life in the real world sport.
Okay.
What does the new game have to have? If you're designing it, what are some key staples that the new game has to have?
Oh, I mean, you got to have the coaching career option, right? Where you can be a coach and you just go through the coaching legacy, I guess, or the coaching career that you can choose. And then, I mean, I don't know if I would change a lot of what you've already had. I mean, are there some things that you're like, man, that would be awesome if they added this to it? I don't know if you're gonna. Are you gonna have fans in the stands with masks on at 25%? Are you gonna do that?
By the time this game comes out, masks won't be a thing anymore.
Yeah, hopefully not. Hopefully not.
How about pandemic mode, where you have reduced capacity stands?
Right, exactly.
Maybe that's just any bowl game in the game. So I'm stealing some of this. I know. So I'm a subscriber to The Athletic, and they had like 18 stories on this game. Probably actually more like 6. One of them was, what did you like to see in the game? And I have to admit, I'm none of these are really that much original thoughts, but I think they're a lot of the consensus. I think you got to have the transfer portal. You got to have to that's so much a part of the game now. You have to, especially if you're doing like a coach mode or a season mode, you have to be able to recruit and keep your players. Because transfers weren't really a big part of the other game.
Yeah. So, you end up having guys going into the transfer portal.
Yeah, you recruit those 2 5-star quarterbacks. One of them, the one that you don't play, has got to go.
Huh. Interesting. Well, what if they both leave?
Well,
what if you get 2 5-star quarterbacks and they both decide to leave?
That would never happen in real life.
No. I can't imagine. So you want the game to be as realistic as possible.
Of course.
So surely you wouldn't have that happen.
I want to see, and this might be getting too like blitz the league-ish or whatever, but this is something else. I want to see like you have the option to kind of dirty recruit, to maybe offer a little bit of money under the table.
Oh.
Or something like that. Or heck, if this name, image, likeness, and this might have to be in the second edition of the game once it comes back out, but like be able to offer your quarterback a commercial deal with the local Nissan dealership or something, and that might get you that quarterback over this other school in the recruiting battles.
Yeah,
I think the whole recruiting, transfer, player ops kind of situation, that's what's so different in the sport now than in 2014, and I think that should be incorporated. Now, think about this too. When you think about things that are a part of the college football game now that weren't in 2014, the last time this game happened. What if you're sitting down there and you're playing with your buddy, and you are, whatever school, and their star player is that safety, that lockdown, hard-hitting safety, and in the first quarter of this big game where all the bragging rights are on the line with your buddy, your safety has a helmet-to-helmet hit and is ejected for the rest of the game.
Here you go.
Yeah. Targeting was not a part of the first game, and that could cause some serious control of the throws.
Yeah, wouldn't be interesting, though, if they just got rid of that and then you could play it, I don't know, like a normal game like it used to be, and you wouldn't have to sit there and try and figure out what's targeting and what's not. Yeah, that would be kind of cool. If you could go on that option, like you said, you were talking about kind of going on a blitz option, like on the game blitz. If you could have pass interference and you could have, targeting and all these other things that you could just get away with no penalties and no rules, that would be interesting. But yeah, I'm wondering how much of that they're going to be able to implement. Do you have to go and you have to review every score? Because then the games would take forever.
Yeah, I think that there should be, and granted, this won't be a thing by the time that comes out, but if it were to come out this year, there'd have to be a thing where if your game got scheduled in the SEC for the 2:30 CBS broadcast, the game would have to take twice as long.
Right? And in Alabama, that's the only way you could get it, is if you were playing Alabama or you were Alabama.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. So if you're trying to get a quick game in and all of a sudden you realize, oh, crap, this is the Alabama game. Instead of taking 15 minutes, it's going to take 30.
It's going to take forever.
Right. So that's going to be kind of cool. The other thing that has to come back from the old game is the mascot challenge.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Did you ever do the mascot challenge?
Yeah, a couple of times.
So here was the trick of the mascot challenge. You had to play with Oklahoma State because the cornerback Pistol Petes were locked down because if they were anywhere close to the wide receiver, their hats would deflect the ball.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So
and
that has to return.
Yeah. No.
Because, and A&M wasn't in that, was there? Because they don't have a mascot.
Yeah, unless you put like Old Sarge in it, maybe you could do that.
Yeah, or just 11 running reveilles.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those options. I mean, would you rather take on one Pistol Pete or what was it? A Reveille-sized Pistol Pete or 11 Pistol Pete-sized Reveilles?
It's already creepy enough as it is. I don't think you need a Reveille-sized Pistol
Probably
Pete.
don't. I think that's Cujo. I'm pretty sure that was that movie.
That's kind of, like Chucky. That's kind of, we're going to get in that realm.
Yeah. We'll stay away from that.
Anyway, that's enough video game talk. That we have about 2 years probably to wait on that, according to Matt and a lot of people, or at least like a year and a half for that to hit the shelves.
So, he waited with bated breath.
Plenty of time to pontificate. Let's talk about what's going on in the world of real Aggie sports, and really what's going on in the world of real Aggie sports is that no one is playing because everyone has COVID.
Yeah, at least basketball, right?
Right. The most interesting / if you're a fan and or on the team, probably frustrating thing is that probably A&M's 2 most guaranteed SEC wins was against Vanderbilt, and so far those have been postponed. And the first one was supposed to be on January 20th, and that one hasn't been rescheduled yet. This is the second game of that series.
Yeah, and that's when Vandy had COVID.
So that could be 2 when you're looking at win-losses, when you're looking at building for the future, because we know this team isn't going to make the NCAA tournament. Those are 2 games that, as much as anything could be a guaranteed win in the SEC for A&M right now, those are 2 guaranteed wins.
Yeah, no, I mean that's arguably the team that A&M could beat. Well, you would think fairly easily, but I mean, gosh, I don't know if I would make that leap on anything right now because A&M is so Jekyll and Hyde at times. But yeah, I mean those are 2 games that you really would like to have, would help bolster your SEC conference record, and haven't had them yet, and we'll see if they end up having them eventually. I don't know if A&M is really going to regret not having to go to Arkansas. But, I mean, if they end up making that up, Arkansas is always a tough place to play, even if the Razorbacks aren't doing that well this year. So, yeah, and we were kind of joking about it. You more or less, you jinxed the team, Travis. You jinxed them.
So, yes, here's the backstory. We were supposed to get Kevin Marfo and Jonathan Aku on our weekly press Zoom with Buzz Williams, and so I had this whole feature planned out on the post, and just minutes before Buzz Williams came in, Evan Roberts, the SID for men's basketball, told us, there's a scheduling issue with the players, they're not going to come. And then all of a sudden, Buzz sits down, and you're like, well, crap, I have a story to write, what am I going to do it on? And so I'm just kind of scrounging quickly through my mental notes and for some storylines and ideas, and the first thing that kind of popped in was, other than the one Vanderbilt game that wasn't even their fault, they've handled COVID seemingly really well. I mean, we haven't even really noticed that any players have missed games because of positive tests or anything like that. So they've and from what Williams has said, they didn't have summer workouts like they traditionally do. They came back to College Station later than they normally do to start fall workouts, all because of the pandemic and wanting to take it seriously. It's a program that has frequently said they're taking it really seriously. So seemingly like that's paid off. And then just a couple hours later, the reason why we didn't get the players was that there was positive tests and they were starting the quarantining and contact tracing stuff. So I went ahead and asked Buzz about how well they've handled the pandemic, and little did I know that they actually had been hit pretty hard.
Yeah, so. Didn't handle it that well. Well, I mean, it's one of those deals. At first, I think, especially around the football season, people wanted to point fingers and say, oh, well, this football team got sick because, their players were being selfish and they were out partying, da-da-da-da-da. Not saying that was never the case, but, I mean, I think we all know people that have done everything they were supposed to do. They followed the letter to the law, or they followed everything to a T, and they still ended up contracting COVID-19. And so, A&M could have done everything they were supposed to, but these guys still go to grocery stores. They still go out and about. There's no way that you can keep them cooped up inside the entire time. And so, that's unfortunate. You hope the guys get better quickly. Everything kind of points to them having a good and speedy recovery. But for A&M, especially when you're talking about Vanderbilt, in a big win, even if it's against a bad team, could help catapult you a little bit. And the fact that you just beat Kansas State, and then if you got a win against Vandy, you're feeling pretty good about yourself with back-to-back wins.
Yeah, that kind of goes into the next question I was going to pose, which is the redundant cliche question anytime this happens, but it's kind of what you immediately think about. A&M has had and is going to have an extended period of the program being shut down and missing games as they fight this little COVID outbreak. If there is a right time, was this a right time for a break? Was it not a right time for a break? I tend to lean towards this was about the worst time this season they could have had a little bit of break because they actually were gaining a little bit of momentum.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, it had a chance to kind of set yourself apart a little bit, and you could have made up some ground in the standings and gotten some confidence. And instead, you're stuck having to wait it out. And if you're A&M right now, I think that is a rough part of it. But they're not the only ones that are having to deal with it, especially in the middle of the season. I mean, look right down the road at Baylor. The fact that Baylor is now on their second time that they've had to postpone games because of COVID-19 protocols, and the fact that, they're having such a great season and they've still managed to keep that momentum going despite that. Well, this time we'll just have to see. You don't know if that's going to be the case or not. But I mean, it really will mess up your mojo for sure.
Across the street from A&M men's basketball is the A&M baseball team that kicked off their practice on last Friday. Their spring practice to gear up for the season. A season that after, I didn't even think about it this way, but someone on the press conference that we had with Coach Childress and some players said it'll be almost 2 years since the A&M baseball team has played a conference game.
I didn't even think about that. You're right. Yeah, because that COVID, they were on their way to their first SEC series, right, last year?
Right. That was on their way they were loading the bus to Auburn when everything got shut down last year.
Went to heck.
Mm-hmm. So, that's just an interesting thing to think about. But another interesting thing to think about is, what is this A&M baseball team going to be this year? Last year was kind of the window year. You had Asa Lacey as your starter. You had Kristen Roa emerging. You had some young arms, some young talent. You had Zach Deloach coming back as an outfielder coming off a Cape Cod MVP-like season in summer ball. I mean, correct me if I'm not remembering this right, but last year was kind of going to be the year.
Yeah, I mean, you had it seems like every year is going to be the year, right? Everybody talks about it, but you had a lot of talented players coming back last season, and I think a lot of folks were thinking, okay, well, this is the year that they can make a run. But I also think, too, when it comes to baseball, I mean, you get these seasons where people have the high expectations, and that's when they underperform. But when they have the lowest expectations, well, that's when they end up going to Omaha. At least that was the case a few years back. There really weren't a lot of high expectations for that team. But the good thing about baseball is it's one of those sports in which true freshmen or JUCO transfers contribute a ton. At least that's what we've seen. I mean, yeah, having guys come back, that's always great. But when you have true freshmen that can perform at a high level, and you don't necessarily, the physicality of it does not come into play as much as it does for football and basketball. So you can be a guy who might not be physically where he needs to be, but he has the tools, he has the talent, that raw talent. You're able to perform that. So you might not have as much pop in your bat as you normally would. Maybe you're not throwing as hard as you might your sophomore or junior year of college, but you're still able to come out there and play pretty well. So it has yet to be seen what this team is going to look like. You do have a lot of turnover, it seems like, every single year for Aggie baseball. I know people are kind of upset with the whole recruiting deal, and that basically this year's recruiting class was not as high as they were hoping, but ultimately it's what you get out on the field and the kind of results you get. And Rob Childress has shown that he's pretty consistent more than anything. It might not get you to Omaha every year, but you'll get in the NCAA tournament every season.
Well, it's looking like if you just start to kind of put the pieces together, Bryce Miller is going to be your ace, your Friday night starter. And then some combination probably of Jonathan Childress. Jonathan Childress is probably for sure the starter. And then you're looking at Dustin Sines, Chris Webber, or even they've brought up true freshman Nathan Detmer as some options maybe to fill either that Sunday starter or your midweek starter kind of role. I would probably lean towards Dustin Sines getting the he's just been a little bit more consistent because of course Chandler Joswak Childress said he wants him out of the bullpen.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he'll be your closer type guy, or just kind of that Bryce Miller role beforehand where you're just that steady Eddie guy out of the bullpen that can come in if anything starts going south at any given moment and eat up some innings.
Yeah, Rob Childress has that ability to do that, and I'm sure that we will see plenty of changes throughout the lineup as the season goes along, because that's something else that Aggie fans have seen. I mean, a guy who is starting in the outfield or a guy who is, in one place right now very well could be on the bench by the end of the season, and somebody who you're not talking about will end up being a big role player or a big difference maker, as well as guys, in the rotation. You'll see pitchers that start out the year as the Wednesday night guy. They end up being one of the best, most consistent pitchers you've got coming in the weekend rotation by the end of the year, and vice versa. So, he also has a really good track record, Rob Childress does, of taking those guys who are starters and turning them into high-level relievers. And so if that's what he wants to do with Joswak, I'm sure that Chandler would be all for it.
Well, we would also be remiss if we didn't at least bring up, I know it's not my beat, so I haven't been following them as carefully as a lot of people like Robert Cessna. I don't know how much you've had to follow it, but the probably the best program running right now at A&M, save for maybe the football team, is Gary Blair's women's basketball team.
Mm-hmm.
They honored the 10-year anniversary of that 2011 national championship win last week. They keep rolling. Again, I say I'm a big fan and reader of The Athletic. There was a piece in there comparing this year's team to that 2011 team and showing how they could have the same kind of a little bit of an underdog run to some big stuff this year. I mean, it is fascinating, the dynamic of this team, how they've been able to gel and come together and produce offense and team defense a year removed from losing probably one of the best players that the program has ever had, individual players in Kennedy Carter, and completely reboot and get things going. Like I said, a season after Carter leaves.
Yeah, the talent has been rather top-heavy, I think, for A&M. As far as an overall team and just gelling together, this without a doubt is one of the best teams they've had in quite some time. Maybe very well could be that 2011 team. I mean, no doubt you can't deny Kennedy Carter's talent and what she brought to the floor, but as far as this team just working as a cohesive unit, this year has been something special. India Jones really is a big time player. I know that she only had 2 points in the win last night, but I mean, she's putting up double doubles almost every single game. And then Aaliyah Wilson's able to get it done. I mean, you've got players that can score in a myriad of ways. And so, you got Gary Blair and company are really rolling at this point, and be interesting to see how they wrap up the rest of the season. I know that they're playing 16th ranked team in Arkansas this weekend. They initially were supposed to play Tennessee, but that got scrapped as Tennessee's working with COVID right now, or working around it. So it should be a top 25 matchup on Super Bowl Sunday at Reed.
Yeah, India Jones is kind of, it's a little bit different because she's a little bit later in her career, but it kind of is a little similar to Emmanuel Miller. She was a great role player, was able to put up some points, but was just kind of one of those good, solid team role players like Emmanuel Miller was last year. And then all of a sudden this year, it's night and day difference. He's all of a sudden their best offensive threat. He's their high point man. India Jones has kind of had that same emergence. Like I said, Miller's a sophomore. India Jones is later on in her career, but kind of reminds me a little bit similar to that. I know we'll probably both admit that we be talking out the side of our mouth a little bit here, but just for the sake of playing radio, what do you think the ceiling is for this women's basketball team? What do you think would be a successful season?
Elite Eight.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I think Elite Eight.
The bugaboo for that program is getting to that Elite Eight level, and I think that would probably constitute a appropriate season, a season that would be expected. I think anything past that is what everyone, of course, is shooting for, and I think optimistically thinks could be the ceiling of this team.
Yeah. Women's basketball generally is pretty top heavy. I mean, you've got a handful of really, really talented teams that you think could have a shot at the national championship, and then it's kind of everybody else. And you have solid teams too. I think A&M has been in that solid team realm for the last few years, but I think they have a chance that they could go to the Elite Eight this year if they keep playing the way they are.
Well, there you have it. I think we've gone through. We could break down a little bit of softball as they gear up next week. That's the other thing going on, and of course, track has a big meet this week, and an indoor meet. They are hosting, and they're all geared up and ready to go. Volleyball, of course, was supposed to start their second season this weekend, but they're dealing with some COVID issues, so those games got postponed. And soccer will be gearing up. I actually got to sit out with Coach G at an A&M consolidated boys soccer game the other night. His boy, of course, is the goalie for the Consol Tigers, so got to chat, and they're gearing up. They've already started up practice and are gearing up for their second slate. That'll be an interesting one we can talk about next week because they split their season. They've already played the conference championship, but they're going to play some more games leading up to the NCAA tournament. They've lost probably their two best players, in Addie McCain and Jimena Lopez, to professional draft, and they won't play the second half of the season in this weird split season that women's soccer is facing. So we can delve into that a little bit more next week. Thanks to everyone for listening. As I said last week, and I'll continue, stay positive, test negative. For Zach Taylor, I'm Travis Brown. This is the My Aggie Nation podcast. We'll see you next week.
It seems like every day, everything just has a way to burst at the seams. But if we don't watch what we're doing, our hearts will get ruined by silly things. Good love ain't easy, girl, we know that's true. And if we wanna keep it, we gotta watch everything that we do, yeah. Don't wanna make sure, my baby, make sure you're sticking with me.